my pleasure to kick off our last kind of bit for the afternoon, and we're starting off with a session with our Conservative MP who's got lots to say, and it'll be a fantastic fireside chat. So it's my pleasure to introduce MP Majumdar for what will be a fireside chat with Robin Guy, VP and Deputy Leader of Government Relations for the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. MP Majumdar is the MP for Calgary Heritage and was elected earlier this year in a by-election and has a long history in the federal government and previously served as the Policy Director for Canadian Foreign Ministers and led foreign policy and national security at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. So I'm sure it'll be a fantastic conversation. Thank you for staying, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Ruhi. Again, my name is Robin Guy. I'm the Vice President of Government Relations here at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. I'm joined with a longtime friend. I think I was trying to remember the first time we met, and I think we've been friends for over a decade at this point, which is very scary to kind of start saying.
I rue the day that we met.
I recall.
You've been a terrible influence in my life every single day since.
You're not the first person to say that, I think, unfortunately. So
Robin and I have the honor of having served ministers in the Harper government, and the battle scars and the telltale stories that we will now reveal before all of you.
He was actually deemed Robin 2.0 after I left, and lo and behold,
Robin 2.0 is an upgrade. You do realize.
Well, listen, thanks very much for taking the time. We were just chatting on the way up here. July by-election, we're here now, fall. Maybe just to kind of kick things off, maybe tell everybody a little bit about yourself, kind of where you came from, and really why you decided to run, because I think that's a pretty interesting story.
You got a few minutes? I'm a series of accidents that were never planned by any imagination. I was born in Midnapore to a family that immigrated from India. Dad worked oil. He was a geophysicist at Imperial Oil. I'm a beneficiary of an incredible upbringing that he gave me. He had a tenure in both Jakarta and Kuala Lumpur. And ultimately, my parents settled in Hawkwood, mom taught, until I became such a handful that she became mom. I went to the University of Calgary in 1997. And in the first week of being on campus, I met two remarkable individuals that ended up changing the course of my life forever. A rookie member of parliament for then Calgary Southeast, Jason Kenney, was on campus to create the Reform Party on campus. And sitting next to me in that first election for the officers that become campus activists was one Pierre Polyev. He was vice president external. I was vice president internal, which I think probably describes both of our personalities. And all those years ago, a quarter century ago, even then we were on the verge of fighting against gatekeepers and for freedom. The Students' Union had tried to play games with the campus club. We were promoting a Senate election. They shut that down. And so we began a protest that started at the Speaker's Corner, which I'm not sure is still active today, marched across McEwen Hall where kids were trying to eat their lunches, and ended up at the Goddess of Democracy decrying the death of freedom in this country. Pierre discovered a great gift of gab in that very moment, and I found my political home forever. My career has been very fun ever since. I ended up working with Preston Manning in reform and in building the conservative movement in my formative 20s. I went to Iraq and Afghanistan to work with Senator John McCain in promoting democracy in those places. I returned home when I was 30 and had the great fortune of being hired by John Baird. If I ever do anything terrible here today, you can credit Perrin Beatty for all of that, because John Baird had been a staffer for Perrin Beatty, and I had the opportunity to work for John Baird. John was wonderful to me as a Minister of Foreign Affairs. He had a full-throated voice of what Canada's interests were in the world. He carried himself well in cabinet and in parliament. He always thought of people as people first and partisans second. After the people of Canada asked us to leave in 2015, I took on two tasks. One was at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. I founded the nonpartisan foreign policy and national security practice there. And the second thing for money, because fun doesn't pay, I ended up working with former Prime Minister Stephen Harper at Harper & Associates, where we worked on energy, technology, and investment, and I led his practice across the Middle East and Asia. Bob Benson, my predecessor in Calgary Heritage, stepped down late last year. I should say late 2 years ago. And I saw where the country was heading, the scale of issues that we have to wrestle to the ground, the kind of willpower necessary to get a very hard job done, and felt the calling to put my name on a ballot. Was rewarded to be the Conservative candidate in a seat that elected Preston Manning and Stephen Harper in March last year, elected to Parliament in July, and sitting in the House of Commons for the first time was a very special thing for me and my family, especially because I believe I'm the first Bengali federal legislator in Canada, United States, and the United Kingdom. So here I am.
So you spent a lot of time, obviously, on the foreign policy side. You know, you're a member of Parliament now, which I've been led to believe, after having served on some foreign policy pieces myself, foreign policy doesn't tend to win elections. So from a new member of Parliament here in Calgary, in Alberta, member of Parliament, what are your priorities?
The priorities of the people of Calgary. And the priorities of Calgary are the priorities of Canada. I mean, when you think about economic stagnation, stagflation, when you think about how half the country is living in recession, I went through 55,000 doors in Southwest Calgary, and the pain and anxiety I have seen in the eyes of so many people for whom the cost of living is creating desperation, drugs, disorder, chaos, suicide, all of the effects of a lack of a prosperous society is the #1 priority I have as a legislator. And then working backwards from the logic of that, it's like, well, what are the things that make a difference in our Canadian economic life? What are the things that deliver the powerful paychecks that Polyev is promising, that allow us to have an economy that is not declining as others rise, along with its influence in the world, but an economy that adds value in ways that feed, fuel, and secure the world? Well, it's our commodities. It's Calgary. It's our energy ingenuity, our food and fuel resources. It's getting them to market and getting those jobs here at home and getting the prosperity going for the country that desperately needs growth, not recession.
So how can we capitalize on those economic opportunities, especially in that energy sector?
Well, listen, I think the C-69 decision was a pretty good first step. You know, I think that you can applaud that in the city. You can applaud that in the city. For 5 years, we've seen a government hell-bent on keeping our most needed resources in the world under the ground. Foreign governments have been coming to this country. G7 partners have been coming here and saying, we want your resources. Germany reorganized their pipeline and port infrastructure in 7 months to say, we want your gas. Japan has been saying they want our gas for a very long time. And to put a full frontal assault on the pipeline infrastructure that would get that resource to our friends, our partners, I mean, 5 years ago was one thing, but not to revisit the decision when Russia invaded Ukraine is a whole different decision. And then launching the just transition ideology upon this city. A lot of what we're seeing is an all-out attack on the things that make this city, this country so great, and at a time in which Canadian leadership needs to step forward, and getting our energy to market is critical to that.
So kind of focusing on C-69 a little bit, just for a quick second. We see the Supreme Court ruling yesterday. Where do we go from here? I think you have almost 2 stories right now that are appearing in the media. One, you know, is obviously we're happy to see it. The other is, well, we still think that this type of legislation is right. So maybe where do we go on that piece? Can we actually build infrastructure in this country? Because I think over the last little while we've seen really far fewer projects moving through the regulatory process. So maybe that's it. Is just, can we actually build a big infrastructure within this country? And what do you think about how we can actually move some of that forward?
Well, taking a step back from the fever-pitched fight that we are in for what makes our country relevant, predictability is what investors require to put capital into projects that run cycles 6, 10, 15 years. Predictability is something that has been scant in Canada for a long time because of our regulatory system, the way in which we do consultations, all of that stuff. So it's a very unattractive environment to invest today. But I think that if we start thinking about how we want to establish predictability concretely, there are a few ways to doing so. You know, we saw in the last 5 years what happens when a government continues to push the goalposts forward, add another chapter to a never-ending consultation, do an extra study. I think it might be time to do things like establish an anti-goalposts law, where government gets fined for moving goalposts around the decisions that government ends up approving or not approving, and to allow investors to claim damages against the investment that they've made. So I think creating a path for recourse for our investment community to invest in the projects that put boots and shovels on the ground, that'd be one big part of it. The second big part of it, as Pierre Poilievre has said, a Poilievre government would make quick decisions on projects. There's 53 projects that are up for consideration. 18 months seems like a reasonable timeline to come to a quick decision, to fulfill our constitutional obligations, to ensure our environmental responsibilities are met, and to get our productivity, to get our commodities to the markets that require it. And then the third is criteria around evaluating which projects get approved within a good, quick timeline. It has become abundant today how important geopolitics is to the supply chains of Canada. You'd mentioned earlier that foreign policy is not a ballot box issue. It's not. But national interests are ballot box issues. And national interests are getting our energy and our commodities to market as quickly as we can. And the geopolitics of the market in which we're arriving in have been shifting so much. Global disruptions caused through COVID, caused through China's authoritarian rise, the impacts it has on global supply chains, these are all critical things. And even when we look at the conflict in the Middle East today, set against the G20 summit just prior, which didn't go too well for our prime minister, but at the G20, you saw massive infrastructure being described that go from across the Indo-Pacific into the Middle East and up to Central Asia and Europe. Today, many of the decisions to create instability are also to create economic shocks. You'll remember that the G7 was created as a result of the oil shocks of the 70s that required price stabilization for energy resources. I mean, these are all defining issues that Canada should be at the forefront of leading as an energy producer and exporter.
So where do you think Canada stands right now on, I guess, on the global stage? I know you probably have a little bit of insight. We probably know where you're gonna answer this question to, but maybe how do we continue to lead?
We have a $2.5 trillion economy. We have debt that's getting out of control. We have money printing policies in which you have economic anxiety as a result of it. Immigration policy not pitched to the homes that we have for immigrants to arrive and succeed at. You know, where is Canada headed? We have $3 trillion of resources under our feet that would be a game changer for the next 50 years, not just for our country, but for the world. My hope is that we marshal our energy, our attention, our ambition to fulfilling that promise for what Canada could be in the world. But today, decisions being made isolate us, keep us out of the critical conversations that define the way in which the world is heading. And the opportunity cost of that is not something academic you read in the Financial Post. The opportunity cost of it is what you see on the doors of people who are not sure they can pay their mortgages in December. So that's, in my mind, the most important thing that we could be doing.
So one thing that the Canadian Chamber's been advocating for quite some time is an economic growth strategy. There's a feeling right now that we don't have that. Maybe we have business leaders in the room. We've got local chambers of commerce in the room. Maybe explain how you think business can better position itself as part of the solution to addressing economic growth, and how can we voice that to government, whether that's whatever level of government that may be able to look at that economic growth strategy.
For businesses, reducing risk and getting access to opportunity is, I think, the lifeblood of any business, right? Let me take a minute just to say that during the government of Stephen Harper, one of the singular accomplishments he made for Canada around the world were trade deals to every continent of the world. We had a stable deal with the United States, which we inherited and has now recently been refined. We had a deal done with Europe, and we had a deal done across the Pacific Ocean. Those trade deals created the infrastructure for Canadian businesses to ultimately reduce risk if they could take advantage of the opportunity. Today, 80% of our economy is reliant on the United States. And in many ways, American production and American intervention are becoming competitors to Canadian businesses. We've had it really good for a really long time with the best partner in the world being the United States. And I think that partnership will continue. I'm a big fan of that partnership. But one of the most important things that I think can be done is to develop means to reduce risk for small and medium-sized enterprises to get into markets that are a bit different, like the Indo-Pacific region. Across the Indo-Pacific region, we have the center of gravity of global growth for the next 50 years. Billions of people are going to be coming online to become part of a middle class. Massive infrastructure is being built. They're going to want products and services that Canadians excel at delivering. They're going to want partners in building the best buildings, the best highways, the best airports that Canadians are market leaders on. They're going to want best business practices around how do you grow a company from small to medium to large, how do you scale, and how do you scale as partners. I think that doing trade acceleration as a service to small and medium-sized companies across the 14 major sectors, economic sectors of Canadian industry, aquaculture, agriculture, energy, education, and we can go on. But developing a specialized plan to help accelerate exposure to those markets and to look at the instruments that Canada has, BDC, EDC, CCC, and figure out how can we best deliver services to reduce risk to get these companies into successful projects. I mean, if anybody ever let me near the government again, I would carve onto the desks of every bureaucrat that when we pursue a prosperity agenda, there's only two metrics that matter. How many jobs are we creating for Canadians, and how much investment is coming into a Canadian idea or service or product? So that's kind of where I would think about moving forward our economy.
Do you have any advice for the people in the room who are trying to advocate for very similar things to what you've just been mentioning?
Well, for advocacy, I like to say advocacy comes down to two really simple things, and not everybody has the heart for it. You reward your friends and punish your enemies. So for those who are standing in the way and gatekeeping your progress and not delivering the instruments that you need or helping you deliver a plan that will get you to market or be more successful or mitigate the risk you have around the projects you're trying to get done, if they're getting in the way, punish them. And you found partners like the Chamber and others who have the skills and the expertise and the know-how on how to get you out of where you are and where you want to go and help you build a plan. Reward them by partnering with them. But the most important bit of advice is, I don't think in the next 10, 15 years, risk mitigation alone will be successful to grow the Canadian economy. Take risks. One of the things I think our economy could use more of is risk-taking. More entrepreneurship is a better thing. And know that I'm working as hard as I can to deliver a government that will be there for you and will have your back when you take those risks.
So we've got a little bit of time left. Maybe I'll kind of say if anybody has any questions from the audience, feel free to please go to one of the mics and we can call on you. But maybe before that, we can chat about your view, your understanding, and both from somebody who's previously advised ministers, somebody who's worked in the government relations sector, but also now as a member of Parliament. Maybe what are your views of the Canadian Chamber? What are your views of the Chamber network itself? And what do you think is kind of our superpower to be able to push issues and push change forward?
Well, the staff, the leadership of the Chamber are really exceptional. They are respected. When they pronounce an opinion, they're heard. When you produce a paper, they're read. And I find all of that immensely valuable. But for somebody like me, as much fun as it is to come and have a chance to share some thoughts with each of you and get to know you a little bit, I'm even more interested in getting to know what your workers are thinking and what's on their agenda and how things are going for them. Because I think that's what constitutes the culture of your company. That's what will be the people that I'm more focused on serving. And how do we get them to, earn better wages? What's their quality of life like? How do we help you make sure you're the most successful executive you can be in serving them? So that's maybe a dimension of going even deeper than the policy conversation and into the human dimension of those who animate your businesses would be a wonderful opportunity for people like me.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Roy Ring, Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, and appreciate your comments as well. And I had a chance to speak very briefly with Premier Smith the other night about the energy message is not lost on Ontario. We know the economic benefit that we receive from the work that's done in Alberta. So just one comment there. I'd be interested in your thoughts around job growth and how over the past 4 years, public service employment has rapidly outpaced private sector employment. True economy is created by the private sector. So I'm interested in your comments there and perhaps where some trajectory in your mind is going to go in the next few years.
Regulatory pressures are driving businesses like yours nuts. We can't build anything in this country anymore. You want to get a warehouse built, your permitting is taking forever. Municipal politicians get in the way, programs are all offered up. I mean, in so many ways, reducing regulation as much as possible to simplify the opportunity for businesses to operate so it's easier and more navigable and more attractive to do those things would be job number one, I think, in many ways in unlocking the private sector to actually be able to dream big and to do big things. It's amazing though, sir, how government employees have expanded so much and things still are not working. Isn't it? Like it drives me nuts. And a lot of these federal government departments are now completely out of money. And so Minister Anand and others of the Treasury Board are going after industry under the guise of fees, sometimes from projects as long as 20 years ago, to try and raise capital to fund their own kind of oversight regulatory projects. It's exactly the wrong math. It should be the other way around, where we try and limit and restrain the size of government so that enterprise can be unleashed and entrepreneurs can take the risks that they need to take. I could get into more specifics around what kind of specific things can be done on that, but I know my leader has some big, bold ideas on that, and I want to make sure that he has the opportunity to do that at his own time. You don't want to get ahead of the boss. So thank you.
It's music to my ears. I think I spent a lot of time talking internally, it seems like to myself, about regulatory modernization and just a simple fact of we don't tend to look at regulation through an economic lens. I think we tend to look at it through a vast variety of different lenses and the simple kind of piece of an economic lens and how regulation can be a competitive advantage for Canada if we were to get it right. And I know I've voiced my opinion a fair bit on this topic, and I kind of the response I get back is, well, you guys just want no regulation. And I can say that's not necessarily the case. I think it's if we can regulate smarter, we can use that as an advantage. You take a look at the IRA down in the States. We can never compete with that kind of money that they're putting in. But if we were to look at regulation through a different lens, I think that could encourage business investment. That could look at really being our competitive advantage in this country.
Hi, France Fournier from the Oakville Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much for your insight. You seem to have had a fascinating career and now into public service. So we as a business community are really interested in hearing directly from Mr. Poilievre. And last year at this AGM in Ottawa, I reiterated that to Ms. Jenny Byrne, that we are ready to host Mr. Poilievre as Chambers of Commerce. And so I'm reiterating that again today. I know that we are looking forward to hearing from him, and the invitation is open.
I will take that back. I will also note that Pierre Poilievre is spending a lot of time with people who are wearing hard hats and boots and putting shovels in the ground and producing things. His center of gravity is, I think, exactly the right center of gravity for what the country needs right now. The workers of this country have been underserved by ideological schemes from federal government, from bureaucracies, from editorial boards, from investment committee considerations. And let me not blame Canada for this for a minute, but let me look at Europe. It took the Russian invasion of Ukraine for Europe to wake up and classify gas and nuclear as green. Think about that for a minute. What were they doing all this time? What were the big European banks defining as ESG? And why? So as I think, a lot of us read the content coming out of here, a lot of us pay attention to this. We need to pay more attention to the workers that are impacted by the big decisions that are being made that try and control their lives over ideological games. And I really congratulate Pierre for staying really focused on engaging all kinds of communities, workers. We have newcomers from across the world in Toronto and Vancouver who I think conservatives always need to do more work with. And the kind of pace that he maintains in Toronto and Vancouver, 15, 20 events a day, talking to new families and how they're having a difficult time getting credentialed to work in businesses like yours. These are all things that I congratulate the leader on. So thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it. Let me tell you that I don't think it's for a lack of appreciation for the work that you do and the direction in which you're trying to take our country, and know that we're working as hard as we can for the people who are also working for you.
RF Khan from Barrie, Ontario, and congratulations, sir, on your recent election. You're sitting in a room that in some way, shape, or form represents exactly that 2.5 trillion that you were talking about and 99% of the Canadian working population. I don't know that anyone in government would ever be accused of being the subject matter experts on a number of issues that you do address in Parliament, but this is that room. And I'm curious, what can you do when you do achieve government, perhaps in the next 18 months, to ensure us that you will remember that we are the subject matter experts when it comes to the economy, trade, business development, et cetera, and that you can hold yourself accountable to the members right here in this room today?
That's a fair question. I mean, when I talked about trade acceleration for the 15, 16 major sectors focused principally on small and medium-sized enterprises, rather than the majors who already are well equipped to navigate the world, I think for us it's just to do what we say we're going to do.
Maybe I'll take this opportunity to ask the last question of our chat today. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for joining us. My question is not directly related to small business, but you alluded to lost opportunities earlier. And so I want to talk a bit about that. This government is unwavering in its commitment to climate, environment, energy transition, rightfully so. I would say we all have convergence on the fact that we need to get to net zero, but not all of us are going to get to that finish line at the same time. And it's unrealistic in some instances to expect certain provinces to reach that timeline. So what are you and your colleagues going to do to hold this government accountable to serve the interests of every region in this country?
That's a good question. You know, I sit in Parliament and I watch our Atlantic Canadian colleagues in the Liberal Party chafe against the carbon tax and the implications the carbon tax has on value chains that affect every level of your business. I mean, axing the carbon tax is one of the most important things I think we can do to make life easier for businesses and for consumers alike. When it comes to the question that you just raised, there's an assumption there that I wanted to address before talking about getting to net zero within our own domestic economy. Canada produces what, 1.6 to 2% maximum of global emissions. That's what we need to drive around the cities like Calgary and heat our homes and move our groceries from farm to fork. We're not a bad country full of bad people that celebrates polluting diesel and all that kind of stuff. We're not built that way. If you want to offset and make a major impact on the kind of pollution that Canada emits into the atmosphere, then why don't we just take our oil sands and all of the production that comes out of there and provide it to India to get it off of dirty coal? That singular contribution would more than offset the emissions that Canadians need to just survive. The other side of it is also what Pierre Poilievre likes to call technology, not taxes. On sequestration, on geothermal, on nuclear evolution, there is so many exciting technologies coming from Canada that would have massive material impact on international emissions. These are real solutions that I think many of your own companies are participating in today, and scaling those not just across Canada, but to markets in which cities are being built for the first time and apartment complexes are being built for the first time in ways that are better, more efficient distribution of power, more efficient use of power, more climate conscious construction. All of these things are things that Canada should be leading in the world on. So when you describe what could we be doing for every region to get to net zero and have the variability of it, my answer is we need to deliver more Canada to the world to reduce international emissions, from our energy to our energy ingenuity.
Shuv, thank you very much for being with us here today. I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule. Thank you for addressing us, and I hope you look to us as partners in being able to move some of those things forward that we talked about today.
Well, I do whatever you and Perrin Beatty tell me to, so it's nice to see you. Thank you very much. Congratulations on your AGM. Welcome to Calgary, and don't be a stranger in Ottawa. Know that we're here to fight for your companies. We're here to fight for your workers. We're here to fight for Canada. There's a promise of Canada that's worth restoring on a range of issues. I'm proud to be a small part of a wider effort to get that done. And it's really fun, Robin, that we get to sit on a stage like this after we started where we did 10 years ago. So thanks for being a great host.
No, and again, thank you very much.